Hi, and welcome to the Ally in Action interview series. Get ready for part 2 of our interesting conversation with our very special guest. So, I want to talk a little bit about this word inclusion, because without inclusion, you can't have allyship, you can't even have diversity, really. I mean, I guess you could have diversity because it's just checking the box, it's a number, but having allyship without inclusion just doesn't make sense. I was looking at some stats probably last month or so, and they were talking about how white men and white women in corporate America saw themselves as strong allies, like 80% of white men and 81% of women, or something like that. They were talking about that they felt like they were strong allies to people of color. Now, on the flip side of that, they went and asked Black women and Latina women, and they got a totally separate conversation. At that point, they were like only 40% and 41% of these women even felt like they even had strong allies at all at work.
Wow.
And so what that says to me is no conversations were had. That says they were not even included in the allyship conversation. These people had declared themselves allies.
Right.
So now let's just talk a minute about inclusion and what that looks like, because without it, you can't get to advocacy, you can't support anyone strongly, and you definitely cannot be an ally.
Absolutely not. And really to me, the biggest principle of inclusion, which you talk about so much in the Transformative Ally framework, is listening. And then a lot of the consulting work I do, even in my work as a teacher, it was about listening, like listening to the people who you claim to want to be helping or allying with, because oftentimes allyship, if it's not inclusive, it's not really allyship, if we're being very honest. And your allyship could be what you think people need, but true allyship is me listening to what you need and then determining if I can provide that. And I think it's really about being transparent and honest. So to your point, like inclusion, the very nature of the word, it does not work if you are not actually including the people whom you want to work with. But this is a common, as we see in the work that we do, like this is very, very common in corporate, in government, in schools, in nonprofits. Like nobody's talking to the people who they claim to be ally for. And oftentimes that allyship is more in word than action. So I think this idea of, and hence Shantera doing this whole series, ally into action, the action really can only come from including and being inclusive of the stories and experiences and voices of other people. Otherwise, the allyship is just falling flat, which is why action, that's the big word. And Shantera is always like, action, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Because if you're not doing that, then it is just a title. So I think inclusion, it has to be an action. It can't be just something we say we're doing. And we saw this with when organizations start creating D&I statements. They started slipping inclusion in there and saying diversity and inclusion statements, when it really was, like you said, just a diversity statement.
Right. Not
an inclusion statement, because inclusion statements should now include practices, procedures, protocols that are going to make sure that people's voices are heard. So for me, if you're not listening to people, then it's not really inclusive. Like I can't give you the pass that is inclusive.
Right. And I like to tell people that if you don't have a relationship with that person, you're not their ally.
You're not. And reading a book is not enough. And reading blogs are not enough. You need to go straight to that person.
A person. And being an ally, saying I'm an ally to a group of people, if you haven't had a relationship with someone from that group, it doesn't work. And also understand that it is a relationship that has to be agreed upon by both parties.
Both parties.
Because I don't just want anyone speaking for me.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when we're talking about my money and when we're talking about my job.
My
I
job,
need you to
career.
understand my goals. I
Yep.
need you to be on board with how I want to get there. We
Mm-hmm.
need to be aligned with, certain values have to be aligned. So it's not just about you, leader, saying you're going to be an ally for me. And I think that's where a lot of companies fall short, because they start to think about, oh, I'm an ally to this group because, I'm the leader, the team lead, or I'm the director or the EVP. No, no,
Mm-hmm.
no. Companies cannot make you an ally. They can probably tell you to try to advocate for someone and ask you to
Exactly.
do the work of advocating. They can also
Mm-hmm.
ask you to be a mentor. But there's
Right.
no way a company can deem you someone's ally, because
Mm-hmm.
you have to have the relationship and they have to want you in their relationship.
Right. And it's a long game. I mean, to me, allyship is a long term, to your
Not,
point about advocate, mentor, ally. I mean, that's a long term game. It's why in Transformative Ally Framework, why Shantera does not deputize anybody as an ally for a long time. That's not a title that you get easily, nor a title that you should want easily, because it's a lot of work.
it's
To
a
the
lot
point
of
where you
work.
may question, do I really want to do it? Which I'd rather you be honest about that and say, you know what, I don't have the capacity to do it, than to think that you're doing it, not understanding that the real true work of allies, which there's some beautiful examples, right? You look at, there are some really great examples of people who have been allies, but they do the work.
They do the work.
And sometimes you put your name on the line to do that. I mean, you risk, there's some risk in being an ally, which I think it's important to have conversations about, so that we're not just deeming ourselves allies, and then other people don't see that or believe that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So now the last thing I want to talk about is
Mm-hmm.
kind of exciting, because you and I are actually going to be partnering up, like for real,
For real collaboration.
real collaboration to create, some changes, and, really on university campuses.
Yep.
And this is what, where all of this started, me trying to do a lecture series, but we've created something that's even a little different from the Transformative Ally framework that I
Yes.
love. And creating Spark
Ooh,
is what we're doing. We're creating Spark. So let's talk a little bit about how that started, because everything is a story.
Everything is a story, right? And fill it in if I miss details. Shantera found out about an opportunity for us to collaborate on a proposal to a university.
Mm-hmm.
And we sat down, we really thought about it. Like, we thought about what she brings to the table, what I bring to the table, and it seemed like a match. And we started with a blank piece of paper for this proposal, and really created a brand new method, strategy to address issues of diversity and inclusion on this campus, which we saw as a method that could be used across many campuses. We can't give away too many details, you all, but that's how it started. It was us coming together and saying, can we bring the different ways that we think, and can we come together and create this unique new way of thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion on university campuses, so that it's sustainable. Because a big part of, and Shantera will share, a big part of creating Spark is that this is about creating sustainable processes that can be done over and over and over again. Because as we all know, DEI work is not a one and done.
Right.
It's a constant process. So that's how it started. It's going to evolve. It's evolving into something much bigger than that blank sheet of paper we started with. But that's where it started.
And it started, well, I'm gonna just tell them what SPARC stands for. It's
right.
SPARC, and it stands for Synthesized Peer Assessments and Real Conversations. Mm-hmm. So we're creating SPARC on campus. And so that's we thought it was kind of cute. Y'all don't have to, but we think it's cute.
I love it. I love it. Right. We're creating
because
Spark.
We're sparking conversations. Mm-hmm. We're sparking these new thought processes, these new ways of being on college campuses. And Kandice can't go out of town or have a weekend without me having a new idea. No. And so
no.
I mean, and I had notebooks full of stuff. But this one, I really wanted to work with her on this project. But what we didn't know is that it was going to turn into something that we were like, hey, this could be packaged.
This is a process, right?
This is a process because like we have a full process. We have like these cool ways that we're going to get information out that not only focuses on the faculty, but also, you know, intrigues the students and pulls them into the conversation, you know, so it's just like this cool thing. Right. And we was like, let's just do this together. This is not a Shantera proposing this or Power Consulting or Kandice. Let's do this together and show that you can, one, Black women can do something together. Number one. We can work together. We can work together.
And still like each other afterwards.
And still like each other afterwards. Now, after I keep coming up with all these ideas, Kandice may not like me or her husband may not like me for me keeping her up all the time. But it's just a way, another way of just extending that mission. Everything I do, I think is still an extension of me helping women and seeing, wanting to see women seen differently. Yep. And so even on my corporate side, my for-profit side, it's always been, what else can we be doing? What else can I be doing? And knowing that college campuses is where I feel like a lot of work needs to happen. Yep. And it would trickle into corporate America if we do it right there. Because I've had so many people say, have you talked to folks at these Ivy League schools and at these big MBA programs? They need this. They need it. They don't know how to talk about lack of culture or bias on these campuses. Mm-hmm. We need it because when we step into corporate America and see it, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know how to talk. We don't know how to interact. But if we set them up now, while they're on campuses in leadership positions, working with them on how to communicate things beyond the protest, beyond the, you know, all of the, you know, things that you're having to do to get the attention in the first place. Right. It's now what? Now that I've gotten your attention, we've marched, and now I got a meeting coming up with someone who can make some changes. Yep. How do I get to the real change?
Mm-hmm. And it's really about, like you said, it's about the fact that especially on campuses, creating inclusive strategies, really creating methods and creating policies that really, like you say, speak to student and faculty voice is so important. I also think that creating Spark really draws from me and Shantera's own personal college experiences. I went to a predominantly white institution, very elite institution, very elitist and lots of isms, but one of very few Black students at the school. Shantera went to a predominantly white institution in the South, in Texas. So that comes with, we bring as Black women who've been on campuses where a lot of people look like us. Also, not a lot of strategies and policies were really helpful to us or really geared towards us. And I know, like, from my experience, I saw diversity statements being pushed out, but then my experience was something very different. And there's this disconnect. And oftentimes as a student, or even as a faculty member who maybe doesn't have tenure, we're not sure how to bridge the gap between my experience and like what I need administration to know. And I feel like that's what Creating Spark does. It creates a pathway, because now, you know, me and Shantera are not in college anymore, and we've worked in organizations and like in corporations, and we understand how a process works to get to a decision maker, but it's a process, right? But we have figured out the secret sauce so that we can bridge that gap and kind of lessen that disconnect that seems to be between the powers that be, right? The people who make who decide the budgets and make decisions, and then the people who are affected by those decisions. So it's personal too. Like, it's personal, it's professional, it's all those things, because we've been those students on campus, right? We know other people who are staff and faculty on campus who are going through this on an ongoing basis. So it made sense for us to, you know, focus on higher ed and on various institutions for this work, at least in my opinion. It feels relevant for various reasons, in addition to it being 2020. And it seems like now we're ready for more conversations, deeper conversations about race, about inclusion, that we weren't ready for even last year.
Right. And I want us to get past this conversation, right? And so I feel like what we've created will allow students, hopefully, to, you know, kind of own the conversation, own their space in the room, and get past this initial, because I think we keep having the same conversation, and we're having the same conversation as a community because we haven't gotten the point across the right way. You know, there's a lot of, you know, we have the anger and we have all of those things, but when it comes to college students, bottom line is you're a student first, and you have to get that degree.
Right.
So what we're doing is trying to help you take all of that anger and all of that you've learned from the protests and what you've seen online, and now we're taking that and we're saying, okay, let's synthesize this. Let's get this to a point that now we can walk into chancellor's offices and, you know, other chief diversity officers and whoever else on these campuses and say, hey, this is the stuff we need to be talking about. This is what's going to change the, you know, trajectory of this university, because the culture is going to change so differently. Again, it goes right back to culture, and it goes right back to being inclusive. Because now when you include everybody in the conversation and you're having the right conversation, things start to change. And so I think what we've created, and I'm so proud of what we've created, and I'm so excited about being able to reach out to universities about this, is something that's going to change the game.
Yes, yes. And I think what makes it so game changing is that it doesn't rely fully on me and Shantera to keep it going.
Exactly.
This whole point about the conversations is that we create the spark, right? Like we literally create the spark in hopes that you are then equipped to keep the conversation going, because we know campuses are very complex places, right? And so the way diversity, equity, and inclusion lives in certain departments, in certain agencies, in certain programming, it looks different. So we start a process that really gets people fired up and gets people to really champion and buy in, and then it can be repeated. So it's also an investment of you learning this process, but then now you get to keep this process with you until whenever, right? And keep working through, because these conversations and bringing people together, especially because a lot of our work rests on bringing students and faculty together, because we know that it can't work without hearing the voice and opinion from both. It's not just students, and it's not just faculty, it's not just administrators, it's everybody coming together. And we figured out a way to do that in a way that makes sense so that you can do it on your own later. So I think that's also something really unique about creating Spark, is that we don't want to be the only people driving this. We want to leave and then it's driving, you know, that car is still moving along, because that's how we know that Spark has really been created, right? Is that it just keeps going and going and going.
And you know, the key, I was brought up in the with the understanding through my consultant world that a true good consultant works themselves out of a job.
That's
it. And not only do you work yourself out of the job, but you leave your client better and better off. And so this, I feel like, does that exactly. We literally go in there and we work ourselves out of a job, but we leave them so much stronger. So much stronger. And so for that, you know, I'm super proud. I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about that effort, that endeavor, and how we're moving forward with it. Just like I was excited about the Transformative Ally framework and what we've done with that. This one is just it's that step further. It's like, dang, one more thing. And so I'm super excited about that. I'm really glad that you and I had the opportunity to, one, sit down and have this conversation, but also that we kept the conversation going for 3-4 years before. That was
you never know what will come out of those little seeds that you're sowing and those relationships that you're building. You have no way. I had no way of knowing or foreseeing this, me and Shantera being here, but I'm so glad that we kept going.
Yeah. And you know, anybody else, that's just a little personal note, you get free food and sweets when you work with me.
You get cake, popcorn. I mean, it comes with perks. So certain collaborations, if you really find the right person, come with some extra perks that are a good thing. So, you know, I encourage people, especially people who think very differently from you. Me and Shantera talk about this a lot, that for all intents and purposes, we would probably never work together. We work in very different sectors. Like I worked in education and nonprofit. She works corporate. I mean, aerospace. You talk about 100% different sectors. We have a different approach to how we do the work. But if you can see past the difference and figure out, okay, what's the kind of silver lining, we kind of found what we do agree on. Yep. And then it all works out. We can kind of bundle all of our experiences around that. And that's what makes, I think, Create and Spark so important, is that we're bringing very different perspectives to a common issue, which is just giving even more solutions that wouldn't have been maybe present before. So, you know, this has been I think it's been an experience for us too, in like how we learn how to collaborate, who you collaborate with, and not being closed off to who you think might be a good collaboration, because we're an amazing collaboration. On paper, it may not look the way you may look and say like, ooh, I don't know if this is gonna work, but it works.
It works. Trust me, it works.
It works. It really does work. It's a lot of give and take, and it works. And, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and just to, you know, even say, just to go back to, we talked about before I close, it's, you know, we talked about the proposal. Right. The fact that we literally wrote a proposal together on Google Doc. Yes. I didn't come in with my part written and you didn't come in with your part written and we edited. We literally started from a blank piece of paper and wrote a proposal in like 2 weeks, right? It was like 2 weeks.
It was 2 weeks. Because it was a deadline on this thing. So yes, it was 2 weeks.
So that is just like amazing. People don't really do that, you know, except for like what those guys on like HBO or Showtime, something in Marrow.
I can't think of the name, but yes.
Yes, they talked about, you know, getting on Google Doc and writing a book together. Right. And I was like, no, you didn't.
Right.
But now I can see how that works when you have the mutual respect, when you know how to work with someone, when you collaborate and you take what they have and what you have and you put it together, you're able to create that, which again goes right back to what we were talking about. True allyship and advocacy and support is, and ultimately coexistence, which is for me the utopia of allyship, when everyone can live well together, and bring all of themselves to the table. Right. And feel like they're going to be valued for it. And I think our relationship kind of personifies that. So I'm grateful to you for that, because, you know, had you not asked the person who told you to reach out to me and so on and so on, it wouldn't have happened. But I'm looking forward to the continued work that we're going to be doing. I'm also looking forward to the conversations that's going to come out of it, because we grow as we learn from other people, right?
Absolutely.
So thank you for taking your time today to have this conversation with me, for other people to be able to share.
Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's always good to just remember and know where things started. So it's inspiring for me to just hear our story again. So thank you for that. And I really hope everyone who's listening really gets something, you know, a nugget of wisdom of something that helps them move forward, you know, in their journey. So glad to be here.
Okay, well, thank you again. And so for everybody else listening and watching, thank you for taking some time with us. And I will check back with you. I want to hear your thoughts. So definitely find me, send me a message, Shantera at Power Consulting, or find me on LinkedIn and Instagram with Shantera Chatman. I will put Kandice's information also at the end of this video, and also in the comments and in the chat. So anytime you want to reach out to me or Kandice, we are available to you. Thanks and goodbye.
Bye, everybody.